Welcome back. Sunday morning. Such a beautiful Sunday Melbourne morning. So we are webinar. We are on a webinar and we want to share our ideas with you. Today we want to welcome ZahraMustafa, who's running or standing for a seat at the Australian Parliament. And then we'll have Cheryl Saunders from Melbourne Uni Law School. And then Jabir will join us from the US. So we have three amazing speakers. But before we go any further, I just want to remind you what we have done yesterday and very quickly summarize what we have done so far. Just bear with me 1 second. I'm sorry about this. Okay, so it's been an interesting day yesterday, day one. We had a lot of speakers, and we still have one of them with us, Noor from Ankara. But we started the day with Dr. Sajan from who was in Wollongong opening session. And then we had Peter Lang, who did an amazing keynote speech on Somali telecommunication. We also had, after that, Dr. Carson from Monash University. And after the break, we had also Dr. Anwa, Sita Anwa from Monash University. Hiro Sukahara joined us from Tokyo. We also had Mohammed Al-Gadi, who talked about Bitcoin. And then Hassan Jama of SPS talked about the impact of social media on Somali politics. And Noor Abukar, who was in Ankara, talked to us about NFT projects to support Somali artists. So it was an interesting day, very informative, very educational. I want to thank all of them. But today, Sunday, day 2, here's our program. We have ZahraMustafa, and she will talk to us about Australian politics from the community's perspective. It's about the Somali community perspective. That is standing, or shall we say running, for the Australian Parliament. Welcome, Zahra. And she will share with us today her ideas why she's standing, why she wants to become a leader in Australia, not in Somalia. But we'll leave that topic for another day. And then we'll have Dr. Cheryl Saunders from Melbourne Law School, who will talk to us about federalism, why it works or it doesn't work. And we have a lot of questions for her. No PowerPoint, but she will just talk to us. And I would like to invite everyone from the Somali community here and Somalia, if anyone is awake at this time of the day, to ask questions or email us and we'll pass the questions to her. And then we'll have Hussein Jabri, who will talk to us about water initiative now. When everyone is talking about politics and election, Jabir wants to talk to us about water and hunger and problems that we need to solve. And as I was saying earlier in the morning, he will have a good friend in Melbourne, Berhan, who always talks about nothing else but how do we solve the fundamental problems rather than the politics and election. Without further ado, I want to invite Zahra to talk to us and tell us why do you, Zahra, want to stand and tell us your ideas. I will stop sharing. It's your turn. And please, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Why am I running? I think past 10 or 15 years, I have watched Australian politics, but also institutions such as education, health, and climate change going downhill. Being a mother and raising 2 children, young adults, and going through the system, I have seen a lot of issues and challenges. Some of them were basically simply incompetent decisions being made by elected members, laws that don't work for kids, for teachers, for everyday people. So I am running currently a seat called a Jaga Jaga as an independent. And I think being an African woman, Somali, Muslim women, it's a new it's a time where we need to enter into the atmosphere of politics and our parliament. And the important is that we need to be sitting the seats where decision and policies are made. Um, that's what affects everywhere. And what I have noticed and learned is that usually politicians have a 25-year-old consultant writing policy. What if 25-year-old have got a life experience or raising family? What we need, so we a change has to happen and has to happen now. Um, COVID have just showing light to and showing us our elected member really how terrible they were, how they were unable to make, whether it's state or federal, how can we not make a proper decisions. But also how the African community being treated by the media and by the politician when politicians made a decision, let's say the hotel quarantine and what happened in the Flemington flats. The African community and the Muslim community is being used as a scapegoat. And so we're not all bad as the media paints us, but we are contributing member of the society. And Australia is my home, it's my country, I'm patriot, and I want a better place. Why am I passionate? You know, I am a mother and I want a better future for my children and our children in Australia. Um, you know, it's been decency and doing the right thing. And I think one of those things that really upsets me is how we treat our First Nations. That's really appalling as a country. It's in our history and it's really ugly and we need to do something about it. One of the key issue is that people are still not accepting that this is the indigenous land, and people are still it's using as a political football for that and not really do something about it. It is just it's not right and we need to change. Why do I care? Simply being a mother, being a woman, I think we have a different perspective. And in politics, what it's lacking at the moment is people with lived experience, people with different diverse experience life, different professions. I'm coming from architectural background. I studied architecture and worked in that profession. And in that profession, it teaches you collaborative. You have to collaborate. And one single project, your consultant, you're collaborating to deliver that project up to 11, from structural engineer to chemical, electrical, you know, fire engineer, planners, and all come together and collaborate to deliver something sound, safe, compliant building. So our parliament should be that for us, not a place where two major parties will pick a fight and pick a, you know, pickering and shouting one another, then really forgetting that we elected them to do a job. And that's been an issue, and that's something that really 2 years people on lockdown have watched it, and we thought, oh my God, how did this get to happen? How do we get to elect these people? So it's for me, it's for time for change. It's for me, it's time that we make a difference. And the electorate that I'm running, a bit of a background about, you know, Jaga. It's a big electorate, but I lived here and raised my children, but also I was the local junior football club, Ozerul. I didn't know anything about Ozerul. My children wanted to play, but I got involved and I put my hand up to be the registration secretary for 3 years and managing 400 players each season. That's it gave me a window, and I formed a friendship and strong community sense because I was part of the community. It was the local primary school where I was the school counselor for a couple of years. I was in the education committee. So for me, it was community connections are important. I think something we are losing. And the electorate, whether we played against one another, whether through basketball or football or Aussie, we have come across the path. of knowing. And I get to meet people to say, oh, I saw you last Saturday, and I'm going like, where I was Saturday. And then it's always in a basketball game, whether I was coaching or my son was coaching or my daughter was playing. And so, and some people kind of questioned me. And I remember first when I walked into the local junior footy club, you know, now I'm not covered. At that time I had a headscarf and a long skirt, and people looked at me, you know, like, it was an unusual place. You'll find a Muslim woman in a junior football club. But simply for me, I was a mother, and I was there. And one thing also in Africa, our African community in Australia needs to understand is that in this country, it's been run, all the junior sports, whether it's cricket, basketball, footy, soccer, is being run by volunteers, it's being run by parents. And that's significant part we need to get involved. And it's giving back, but also while your kids, someone is coaching your kids as a volunteer. So what you can do as a parent is get involved, because that's your community. And integration is really important. Getting involved in local sports, it gives you a community and connections. And as they say, all politics is local. So for me, running, I've got a lot of support from the community, and said, oh, some of them said to me, oh, we thought you're going to do that. You're always the loudest person who wanted to fix when there's a problem. Or if there was a situation that I was the one they've called me and say, hey, Zahra, can you help and do this? And so it's amazed me and inspired me, and to be honored that I am supported, and the community, I say, yeah, it's time for change. But also it's time for change for our parliament. Our parliament needs to reflect the diversity and multicultural society that we are in Australia. And that needs to change, but also women participation, Muslim women's participation, African women's participation. And so we're looking into the bigger picture. And it is better to be sitting on the decision-making table than sitting on the sideline and screaming and complaining. So for me, it's taking action. Through action, we can create a change. Through loud voices, we can create a change. And so that's what made me stand and run. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Zahra. That's a very interesting take, and I enjoyed what you were saying, but I want to allow other people to reflect and ask questions. So are there any questions, comments?
Zahra, just to create a question for you in terms of how would you prove that you are, you know, more interested in this local politics? What makes you to be interested, and why are you interested?
What made me interested and why very good question. Why am I interested? I have seen laws that be made, that whether it's education funds, how educators, so if you look into how schools are funded and education funding, it's quite poorly. Kids with learning disability don't get what they need. The classroom really, it's too big. There's another issue under Medicare. 14-year-olds cannot be linked to their parents because they need a privacy. What do 14-year-olds have a privacy from their parents? So one thing that really boils my blood is that the government wants to come into our homes and tell us what we can and what we can't do, which that is really wrong. We elected government to govern, not to govern us. And it's poor decision making. Who on earth that thinks 14-year-olds is capable of calling Medicare and setting up their own MAGA? As a parent, do I want my 14-year-old calling a stranger on the other side and talking to some stranger that she doesn't know to create? That is just stupidly and incompetent. So do you think that person who was sitting in that policy making table had a children and understood what 14-year-old? No, they have no clue. And why suddenly our children need my privacy from me? I'm the parent. I wipe their bottom. So what sort of privacy they need from me? That's just ridiculous. Some of the decision in 2013, Tony Abbott changed how special needs funded. they usually was individual based, and that funding will go to that child. And so what has happened is that he gave in the decision making to school, so the school would decide what they think. So suddenly that child has lost what was given to him that was and funding, let's say it was 20,000. So you've been put in a pool, and you, as a parent, you don't know what your child is getting. And so it's ridiculous. There's another thing that this is a lot of challenges a lot of African and Muslim kids face. When they get to year 10, the kids are asked to leave the school. Imagine you've been schooling, you've been there for 10 years or 7 years, and suddenly you're year 10 and you're at school, people who had a duty of care, who's supposed to be paid by taxpayer to look after you, are telling you to leave because you can't do VCO or we can't provide you. It's illegal and unconstitutional and unacceptable. So these are things that made me want to run to make a better decision-making policies, because people who are making those decisions are not, and we need to be loud and we need to be telling them how wrong. And for me, I end up fighting for those things. I worked as an interpreter while I was studying. I have seen a lot of things that you think, oh my God, this is really wrong. One thing that my children have done Air Force cadets, and I've been participating in ANZAC for a long time. And I get to talk to those veterans, and it's appalling how we treat them. And it's about decency and doing the right thing by the people. If we send them to a war, we should be looking after them if they came back and well. And so we not tended to look the seniors, veteran and children, we're not looking after them as we should. And we're trying to tell families how they parent, what they can and what they can't do. No, I don't want the government in my kitchen, in my house, telling me what I can say to my children and what I can't. And so treating people that we all somehow, parents are bad and we need to regulate them, it's terrible.
Well, thanks, Zahra, and the other questions or comments from the audience.
Yeah, I've got a question for Zahra. I might not be too familiar with the dynamics of the specific Australian elections, but so you're running as an independent. So who are your opposition candidates and what do they represent and what makes you different from them?
The current incumbent is the Labor Party, and this seat has been a safe seat for the Labor Party for a long time. And when you become, we know in Australia, if you become a safe seat, you never get anything done because people get comfortable. What makes me different is that I'm local. I raised my children, and I'm longer-term volunteer in my community, and I understand the issues that we face. But also, I'm a Somali-Australian woman, different life experience, and lived in different places in the world. And raising children, we all know it's really challenging. So what makes me different, but also one thing that has happened in my electorate, and there's a large Somali community, the Labor, the current incumbent party, what have they done is they have used the Somali community for the party factional political and abused, and nothing was delivered. And so, and that's also itself, it's really wrong. And political parties do, they use migrant minority community that don't understand the system, and they take advantage, and that self, it's unacceptable. What makes me different from the policy is that I'm standing to say it's time for Australia to ban foreign investment into our property, into residential property, into our farming and dairy, because what has happened is that we allowed others to come and bid. And so my children, and a lot of parents I talked to in my electorate on board with me and say, yep, I was auctioning last week and there was a foreign bidder. I couldn't get the property because they couldn't bid it. My neighbor wanted to buy a block next to him. He was bidding, this is 6-7 years ago, with another foreign buyer, and there was a representative who was a local dad. And in the end, but this property should have sold for 1 million, but it went to 1.5 million. So our hardworking Australian cannot get into the property market because you have a wealthy individuals from another country bidding them, and so the property market's going up, which is not bad, but you put in local people out. So in the end, in the auctioneer, this person looked into the other person and said, mate, you're going to push the price up. I own this one and I want to own this one. I'm going to go ahead. And he was trying to help his daughter and her partner. So my children will not be able to buy property without my support. And that is really wrong. We are taxpayer. We should have the priority. We come first. And that's something that we open to the door, and it's just terrible. If you talk to the local people, everyone will say, yeah, that's bad. Oh, we will love that. So it's time to stop this thing where we've been sold. I feel like our elected members are selling us, and somehow I don't know why. And in some sense, I understand, because most of the major parties are in the pocket of big corporation, whether it's the gambling or mining or fossil fuel. And we know who pays the bill is the boss. We elected them, we should be the boss, but we're not the boss. It's who funded their campaign. And they got millions and millions donation. So the system, my 16-year-old daughter said to me, the system is broken. If a 16-year-old, and that's something that's being shared among her friends in their age group, and to say the system is broken, it doesn't work, it does not make sense. So this is what makes me different, the lived experience, the challenges and the issue that I have seen. What makes me different is that I'm not political staffer, I'm not a lawyer, I'm coming from a completely different professional and background, which all based collaborative work to deliver something sensible and sounding good, but works for everyone.
Well, thanks for that, Zahra. Any other questions or comments? While waiting for other people to join us, Zahra, I would like to take this opportunity also and ask you a question. My interest, as you know, is always Somalia and Somalis and Somali community. And good luck to you. Now you want to go to the wider world and help and solve some of the major issues in Australia. And I hope you will win and then contribute. But if you don't mind, and you will forgive me for asking you about our local Somali community, and by extension, Somalia itself, what is your reaction to what's going on with our community in Melbourne, or so I'm talking about Somali community now, and I really appreciate your reaction to what we were reading in the media lately about the Somali community leaders and so on. I'm quite happy to hear your personal view or even your political version, whatever version you want to answer, but I would really appreciate your comment on this.
I only have one version, and I only have my view. My political view is my personal view, and I think this notion that the politicians should have two separate opinions, that itself is really wrong. That means we're not authentic, and we're not saying what we really think and we believe, and we're trying to say what we want people to hear, and that's really wrong. The Somali community in Melbourne are living in different areas. They all don't live in one area. They're quite scattered around Melbourne. It's a community that, the first generation, it's only they've been here 35 to 40 years. And when I say, but last 20 years, or 25 years, there's large migration of Somali into Australia as well. So you have a different generation, first generation who not speak English, and the first generation who came here young, who grew up in the system, who spoken English, professionals, works in their own business. And Somalis are quite entrepreneurial. If you look at it, most the areas they live in, they're business owners. They're running restaurants, they're running, travel agency, they're running, NDIS, age care. They just running business. They are small business owners. And there's another word, wasosar, that's Somali. Let me add that's the people with who can entrepreneurial and in a better word. yes, there is a challenges they face, whether where is they feel, you know, discriminated, you know, they in a new country, you know, they raising children, and it's a different way of raising children in Australia compared to Somalia. So and all migrant, whether it was the Italian, the Greek, the Macedonians, the, you know, Vietnamese, everyone who came had a challenges, and they facing these challenges. They're not different, you know. Teenagers are hard to manage for them because it's new way of, you know, parenting in Somalia. It was different to parent. It was the whole community knew, you know, my dad and mom didn't know when I left in the morning and came home. They didn't know what I did. So it was a safe environment. But we're living in a 21st century, and it's different world than what most of the parents grew up. And so there is challenges through schooling or through the policing for the community, but the community are working really hard. They are quite proactive. And you can't, you know, I can't paint them all what the media does. Media's also itself does force racism towards marginalized and minority community. And it's written badly, so we can't believe everything we read. We don't know what has happened, and it's, as there's a saying goes, that there's always two sides to stories. Only we know the one side. But the one thing that I'm aware, and most of the community, Somali Australian community face, is they don't want to speak up. If someone said something about the community which is not really wrong, the community don't want to come out and defend it, because they feel they will be defamed further and further. And their view is that if we're trying to clarify what was said was true or not, we're going to be written badly again and again. So what is the point of saying something? So in a sense, you've got community that lost their voice to defend themselves. And I had this conversation that we need to form some sort of a group that will be that speaks for the community and to trying to defend them. Look, there's individuals who will take advantage, because the Somali community, and you know, they're not new, but they've been here for 30-40 years, but there's still people who are taking advantage, where especially the Labour Party, they really thrived on the African and the Somali community. They rely on their votes to get into power. But what also they've done is that they teach this thing where they're giving a lot of grants. Yes, grants have a role in the society, but the grants should not be dependent. So they created this codependency that you vote for us, you're going to get the grants, and you've got people who are not really thriving. Not all of the community is a small part of the community. So codependency, it's always bad. And handout, it's bad. Somalis are quite proud. Or toxic. Grants are toxic. So they don't like that. That's something that we quite proud and go like, no, I worked hard. And so they are hard workers, but there is some political parties that take advantage.
Thank you for that.
So even looking into Somalia and in back Somalia, I think in Somalia, they need to solve their problem. They need to do, people here cannot make a change over there. People who are on the ground need to make those changes. And I think foreign aid is terrible for Africa and Somalia, because it's the same, it's codependency. You get to hand out. People are not working hard. They're not really, it's a rich resources country. They should be working hard and earning, you know, and discovering and creating life for themselves instead of relying on someone else's donation. I'm against the foreign aid.
Thanks for that. Any other questions, comments?
I can comment, Mohammed.
Yeah, Brian, and then Noor. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment from my previous failed election attempts to Zahra. I heard you loud and clear, your passion in education. But remember, one issue doesn't take to Canberra. You have to have more. If I were to sit in your position or to start commenting, I would say lack of leadership. And that brings many things for you to explore. Australia is failing because lack of leadership. COVID is the best example that you can pick. State and federal government fighting each other between states' borders. and leadership has been dependent on a daily accidents rather than leading us by sort of vision to somewhere. No, they were leading us by whatever mistakes was happening to us. The global climate change is best example, another to put on the table. Then in the local issue, as I said, was education can be one, but also one of the biggest crises is the multicultural community that you are part of need to be included in the decision making. And that will be a good keyword for you to use, because the government or in general parliamentarians feel guilty because they're all white Anglo-Saxon men. Now the diversity has been all focusing on white women. So they want to diversify that in terms of attracting others into this game. So your opportunity should hit leadership. And then from that trickles to many of this issue. And then that would give you a broader vision with emphasis on, as I said, education can be that, employment or whatever, but broadly you have to look to the way to Canberra includes national issues and issues that is not, or issue that you feel like missing in Canberra, that what you can add. Why are you going to Canberra? To add a value. And what's that value that you need to look at? Because I will bring special value from my experience as a child, from my experience as a migrant in Australia or as a refugee, as belonging to a group of communities that are marginalized. That experience builds resilience in the parliament, because most of them from Melbourne University straight to Canberra. So that journey would be different to your journey, and that's where I see. And look, I'm sorry I didn't put my face. I'm enjoying breakfast with my wife. So
no problem, Burhan. I also have to open the door for the boss. I've got a cat who knocks the door. So now, welcome Jama, Hassan from SBS, and I think Noor was also trying to ask a question.
Yeah, I think my question was regarding some of the comments that you made, Mohammed, about how Zahra, as a Somali-Australian, what almost can we sort of bridge from Australia to Somalia? And something that brought my mind, a thought to my mind that I think is something that I'd love to explore with Somali-Australians is that I know Somalia has quite a good technical. Can you hear me properly? Yeah, a good technical knowledge of mining in the mining sector, and specifically with opals, and whether there is, and I know in Somalia there are opals, and we lack the capacity to manufacture or sort of add value through the cutting and polishing process of opals. So maybe these sort of little niches where there could be some sort of technical knowledge transfer could help Somalia as well as bring value to Somali Australians. Something maybe we could
manufacturing, I guess, and experts and support. But I think as for Australia, it's always we have a foreign policy, and our foreign policy we always focus to what is the interest of Australia. And for me, I'm standing as an Australian citizen. And so my priority and my policy will be always focused on Australia's best interest. And if Australia wants to, build a business partnership with Somalia or Africa, that's great. But those resources and, opals and all that would be a private business. And manufacturing. And I think manufacturing has to be local. I think we learned through COVID that has to be local, not global, and ensuring that we do have, every country maybe is develop their own local manufacturing and that. But yeah.
Thanks for that. Any other questions, comments?
Just one quick one. Thanks, Sarah, for your presentation. Maybe this may be a bit too early, but I'll ask anyway. Australia has this very complicated preferential system, and there are deals done behind the scene. Who you're preferencing and who's preferencing you depends on where your values are, who's closer to your values, what policies different parties enacting. So have you worked out who you would preference and who you think would preference you?
I haven't worked out and haven't made a deal. Yes, there's differential votes, and everyone is saying to me, "Oh, that's really important. Make sure you preference someone or preference you back." But I think that's a discussion that I will have later on, after the election is announced and who's running, because at the moment we don't even know who's running. But yeah, it always comes back to values and also what policies that I want to push forward. Do we got lines of things that I wanted to change, and so that will something will come to later, but not now yet. But that's a question people asking me all the time, and I'm saying that I don't know yet, and that's my I don't know yet. But also by the Constitution, I don't have to give my preferences to anyone, and so it's always working out. If I put you first, will you put me first? It has to be two ways. And I'll cross that bridge when I get to it.
That's interesting way of looking at it. Some people will also say you should line up your ducks, or whatever the expression is. You should be engaging other people. But Zahra, I just want to bring you back again to the Somali community and take this opportunity to ask you a bit more about the Somali community. I'm not saying about the Somali community in terms of numbers, or you need their numbers to vote for you, even within the area you're in Jaga Jaga. But in general, I'm just asking you why it took so long. For example, I think we've been around in this country nearly now 40 years or even more. What was the delay? Why it took so long? And what are the other possibilities? Are there other people like you who are also showing interest in the local politics?
I think there's a lot of, especially last council election and previously, I think they have shown interest in politics and they run in the local government. And some did run state and as an independent, but also not the Somali community and African community. The challenge is that the major parties, people run, and the major parties not tended to give the multicultural candidate a platform to run. They do want the multicultural and African Somali community votes and support, but when it comes to wanting them to run, was not able to run. Several people that I spoke to said they were member on the Labour Party for a long time, and they wanted to run it every time. They were like, "It's not your turn, it's not your turn," and they've been discouraged and left. So for them not getting involved, it's not the community's fault. It's the major party's barrier on not wanting them to be the face or standing up. And what has happened, I think, last election, especially the council election, a lot of Somalis, and especially in Melbourne and Moorabbin and that area, there's a lot run. And even where I live in my area, there's the younger Amina run as an independent in a seat where I live. But sadly, she didn't get in. And there's only one Somali got in I think Melbourne City, but not many got in. But a lot of them said they lost on very 100 votes, they missed, and it's a success. Even though they didn't get elected, that is itself its success. They stood, they ran, and they didn't get into in a small percentage. So, but also the community view is that, well, I'm not going to get the opportunity, I'm not going to get in, the party's not going to give me the opportunity. Where for me, I was different. I was a liberal. And I was endorsed, and I think, and in previously, the Liberal Party had a Somali woman candidate in Queensland who ran for federal. She didn't get in, but that its success. So even when I look to the major party, Labor and Liberal, even though our community are voter of the Labor Party, that Liberals seem, even though we see Liberal in different lenses, you see that there's two Somali women who've been given the opportunity to stand federally. And I wanted to see the Labour Party doing the same thing. not using the Somali community and the African community and abusing them, but giving the chance to run and lead, because there's a lot of leaders. And this party, you know, what they do is they just put someone because that person is politically staff out, they came through the ranks and they don't have a real life experience. They're not, you know, they don't understand what it means to raise a family. They don't understand what challenges every Australian face, and they're in a bubble. They're in that Canberra bubble. And majority of the, you know, lawyers, I would say, or political staffers. So you've got two professions that people mostly don't trust that running the country. And so I think the Somali community has done their best they could with the barrier and the challenges they have faced, not only the Somali community, but the African community and multicultural community. And so people tended to kind of talk, the media tended to talk about the Somali community quite negatively because of the Labour Party's involvement. And I think I will say to the Somali community and the African community, you really need to look at the value of who you're giving your votes. Who is, you know, if I look at the majority of the African and the Somali community, small business owners, who pays the tax in this country, who hires people the most? Small business pay and small business owners and medium business owners, and that is most of the migrant multicultural refugees. The big corporation, they have a bargaining deal where they can negotiate and they can pay their staff less, where small business owners, they have to pay the minimum wage. They have to comply. So the Labour Party says, oh, you know, we're here for the workers. Really? The workers pay money to them. So it means that as an African migrant and multicultural, look at who you're in line with your value. Who supports the small businesses? Who gives a tax break? Why big corporations are not paying money? So I think our community needs to really look at the value of the party. I know we tended to get habit of one person gets involved in one party, we all walk into the same door. I think that's time it needs to change, because we need to look at it a value perspective of are we in line or not. And I can say most of the Somali and African community are naturally more conservative side. They don't want a government telling them what to do. They want to practice their religion. They want to practice their culture, and they don't want someone suppressing them. And some parties done that really well. So I will say we're doing pretty well compared where we have been, but we could do better getting involved and sitting in a policy making decision table and getting involved. I think one thing we need to do, and I will say a lot of to the African community, get involved, get active, get involved in your local, basketball club, soccer, footy. One of my best experience with my two children is Auskick. We were going to the MCG every weekend, Sunday, Saturday. And I remember once me wearing a big headscarf, standing middle of the MCG, 100,000 attendance between Collingwood and Hawthorn playing. And my daughter was playing one corner and my son was playing. And I was standing in the middle of MCG, the goalkeeper wearing this white coat with the two flags and doing that. That was just an experience that I will remember forever and my children will remember. But we need to be the places that we are not being seen. We need to participate and get involved because we all got so much to contribute. And Australia will be a better place when we all get involved and we have different experiences, we have different backgrounds, we have different leaderships, and we need those communities getting involved.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. That's well said, Zahra. I appreciate your comments. Are there any other questions or comments? We are getting to the last 5 minutes now, so over to you. Questions, comments. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Maybe I'll take advantage of this again. Zahra, I want to thank you. I think this was very educational for me to I've been away from Australia myself for a long time, so actually to see how my community moved forward. I also want to thank Burhan for his comments and questions. Ibrahim probably could be a good mentor. He knows the ropes. He went through this process before. But I'm very excited that really that you're so passionate about this. And I wish you all the best and success. And we'd like to see Somali face in the Australian Parliament in Canberra. Um, we still have a few minutes left. Are there any last minute comments or questions?
No, where's Peter? Is Peter there?
Hello? I can't see any hands. So maybe you convinced everybody, Zahra. So that was really
No one's got a question for me. That's all right.
no. Maybe your contribution was so comprehensive that you got your message through. But if there are any questions or comments, we still have a few minutes left. If not, I really want to take advantage of this opportunity to thank you, Zahra. And there are a lot of people watching us on Facebook, and probably back home, people will wake up in a few hours' time. And if there are any feedback, comments, or questions, I will forward them to you. Please reply to them. And if you want to stay a bit longer, Dr. Cheryl Saunders from Melbourne Uni will join us. And
I'll make a comment to this on my website. So if people want to contact me, they can go on my website, ZahraMustafa.com.au, and there's a link. They can, email me if they've got any questions, and happy to engage and in online discussion, or Facebook, on Instagram, also in TikTok.
Thank you. Now we'll have a short break. Please grab a cup of coffee or water because we have very interesting talk coming up with Professor Cheryl Saunders from Melbourne Uni. So we will continue in another 10 minutes time. Take care. See you.